We're going to talk about making cups with this video, and to make your set of cups, you might want to start to, if not weigh out your balls of clay, to make sure that your balls of clay are a consistent size. That way the cups in your set can all be matching each other. It'll also really help you develop your skills. If you know, for example, that you throw with X amount of clay, you can make a piece that's 5 inches tall, then it will help you in remembering each time how much you ought to be pulling the clay up in the air. It'll help you with trimming it later on in knowing ahead of time how much to anticipate trimming off. So if you can weigh out your balls of clay for an average, large, healthy size coffee cup, what you might think of as a standard big size cup, you might want to have between a pound and a pound and a half of clay. This size ball is closer to a pound. This one, a little larger, is closer to a pound and a half. Using a relatively small amount of clay for a cup should make centering fairly easy if you can remember to hold still. I'm still going back and forth between the two centering hand positions. That is this first position, what I call the butterfly position. Starting scraping the bat down as low as your hands can possibly go. Come in on the base and make sure any irregularity at the base, any kind of splayed out on one side or the other, is all contained, and that you don't have any kind of toenail really sticking out on the bat head. That you're working all that clay up into the mound, gently releasing pressure as you come to the top, and then pushing it back down. Here I keep my left hand on the side, my right hand I use the bottom part of the fist up on the rounded shoulder of the mound of clay, and I push it back down to a gumdrop shape. Make sure you're in a locked body position with your arms in, elbows down. My two hands are locked against each other. How you hold your hands will be slightly different. Obviously, everyone's hands are a different size and shape, and if you use slightly more or less clay than I am, you're going to hold your hands in a slightly different position. But if you notice here, my hands in this position are placed in a way that they're touching the surface of the clay all the way around. I'm touching every square centimeter of it simultaneously. And I'm making this very contained, rounded shape that's just about as tall as it is wide. And I could pretty much center the whole thing, the entire process, just from this push down hand position. But if it helps, go back to this coning up position, starting at the base, and slowly work irregularities up to the top. That can help to isolate them, and then push it back down. It might also help to come in at the base with the square corner of your wood rib and carve away. I have just a little bit splayed out more on one side than on the other, in that little skinny uneven toenail or comet tail that's sticking out down there. It can really help to come in with this tool, get a firm grip. I've got my left hand on top of my right hand, and I'm going to come right into that bottom corner, scraping the bat. And carve that away. It's only wasting this much clay, a very small amount, but getting rid of that small amount that was uneven at the base using this tool will be able to help me manage centering all the rest of it to a state of perfection. Pay attention to the size of the base of your mound of clay now, because obviously if you want a cup with a wider base, you would want to start with it wider right now when it's in the enclosed mound shape. If you want a more narrow bottom on your cup, you could start with it more narrow. To make it more wide, I'm just going to push it down a little bit more and change the shape of my mound to be more squat. Okay, now I'm going to open the clay. I'm using the thumb of my right hand, and I'm letting it kind of naturally come into the middle of the mound. My left hand is in a supportive position here, and it's helping to hold my right hand steady. And it's also by my left arm just being against my rib cage, it's helping to hold my whole upper body steady. by having my left hand in place like this. The tip of my right thumb is going to just glide into the center, the bullseye of the mound of clay. And I'm going to start pressing down gently and slowly because you want to make sure that you make your hole on center. After just a little bit of a depression, I'm going to get some water in the hole. And then once you've gone down a little bit and you're sure that you're on center, you can start to go down more strongly. If the whole height of my mound is about 2 inches tall right now, I've pushed my thumb down in there slightly over 1 inch, and I'm gonna pause here and measure with my pin tool how thick the floor is left. So I'm gonna take my pin tool and pierce through the clay floor until the tip of it is touching the bat. And then I'm gonna run my index finger down in there, stopping at the level of the clay. And if I hold my index finger in place when I extract it, I can see how thick the clay floor is. This is about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch thick. I don't want to go any thinner than that. I'm going to go ahead and open the floor on this using the thumb of my right hand. And in this case, I want to make a level floor. I want the floor to be completely level with the bat head, with the wheel head. I want the floor to be flat and horizontal. So when I stick my thumb down in there, I'm going to slowly pull it across the bottom, slowly opening up the clay down in there from the bullseye out to the 3 o'clock position. And I'm going to try and keep my thumb tip perfectly level with the wheel head. And now I'm going to start to pull my thumb out. And as I do so, I'm trying to keep it completely level and straight to make a flat floor in there. Now I'm out about as wide as I want to go. I'm going to pause here. Pause and hold here for several revolutions of the wheel head. Maybe let it go around 10 or 20 times as you slowly release your hand. So the floor is flat and level, and where the floor comes to meet the wall, it does so at a right angle. And that inside corner in there is going to be a 90-degree angle. And it's really important that that corner in there is level, that the floor meets the wall at the same exact height all the way around the circumference of the piece, that the floor is flat and compressed and it meets the wall at a consistent angle. Otherwise, your cup will be crooked. I'm going to go back and forth across the floor now and compress it with the sponge. I'm holding the sponge in my right hand. Get a firm grip on the sponge. And again, my left hand is bracing my right hand. And I'm going to press the sponge down on the floor. This is kind of a moderate pressure. And I'm sweeping the sponge across the inside floor in a line that goes from the bullseye out to the corner at about 3 o'clock, as if this was a clock face looking down on it. Slowly go back and forth, holding for a moment as you're in the bullseye, sweeping across the floor, holding for a moment on that inside corner where the floor separates from the wall. Slowly back in towards the bullseye and slowly sweeping back out to that corner. I'm trying to make the floor more compact. I'm trying to compress the clay down in there and give it some tightness and firmness. I also want to make the floor in there clean and level, just so it's pleasing to look at, so it looks finished and controlled. But in terms of the clay, compressing the floor can help prevent cracks upon drying. The walls get a lot of compression when you're throwing, and the floor needs to have some similar compression manually applied to it, or else it could crack. As I go back and forth across the floor, each time I'm going to hold at that corner and make sure that the corner down in there is level. Make sure that you have a flat floor that's spread open wide and meets the wall at a relative 90-degree angle, and that there's a clear level demarcation or a clear level shift between a flat floor and a wall that's going to come straight up in the air. So don't go on to starting to pull the walls up in the air until you have the floor finished on the inside. The floor is your foundation. It's the base of your cup. And that foundation base needs to be set and established and level and compressed and spread open wide and flat and all of that good stuff before you go on to the walls. Just like building a house or another building, you do the foundation first and you do the floors first, and then you put the walls on top of that solid base. So my inside floor is good now. I'm going to start to pull the walls up in the air. I'm going to hold the sponge in my right hand, and that's going to go on the outside of the clay at 3 o'clock. I've got a good grip on the sponge, and the sponge is going to be in between the pads of my fingers and the clay itself. My left hand is going to go inside the pot, and the pads of these left fingers are going to be directly across where my right fingers are, so that finger pads are pressing against finger pads with the clay and the sponge in between. My left thumb is bridged over and touching on the back of my right hand. Elbows down and in, you're bent over, and your knees are in on the side of your wheel. The sponge starts scraping the bat head on the outside. So this right here is the starting position. From this position, I'm going to apply a moderate amount of pressure, and then I'm going to slowly start to bring my hands up in the air. As I come off, I'm tapering off the pressure until I get to the upper portion where I'm barely pressing at all. And on the rim, it's pretty much just really slowly letting go. To get water on the piece now, I'm going to dribble it down from the rim, and then I'm going to keep sponging out any puddle that might accumulate on the inside. I'm going to get ready to do the second pull now. Again, this is my starting position. The sponge starts scraping the bat. My left hand is inside the pot, directly across from where my right hand is, and my left thumb is bridged over the rim to my right hand. Knees in, elbows down, slightly bent over, and I'm going to apply pressure with my right hand. You can see how much pressure I'm using because you can see the indentation that my sponge is making on the outside of this cylinder here. Come up slowly and start to taper off your pressure. And as you get to the upper part, it's really more about gradually letting go. And the rim up here, I'm really just gliding off. Very gently release at the top. As I exit each pull, I'm going to use my sponge and slightly press down on the rim to keep the top edge compressed and rounded and controlled. It can start to get really frayed at the top and really thin. You can start to accumulate sludge clay up there, and I want this rim to be controlled. Before I do the next pull, I'm gonna pause for a second and just glide my fingers up and down. I'm not really applying pressure here, but using one set of fingers on the outside and the inside directly across from each other, I can feel how thick the clay wall is. I can feel that right here, I've got a thin spot. I don't even have to look at it. In fact, try this. Don't look at the clay. Instead, use the eyeballs that are in your fingertips and sensitize your fingers to feeling the thickness just by gliding your hands over it. So I know when I do my next pull right here, I have to be more gentle. And I can also feel that right here, there's still quite a bit of thickness. And I know if I apply more pressure here, I can use that to make this a bigger piece. I can feel that up here in the top inch, it's pretty much right where I want it. So I'm not going to apply much pressure there at all. So I'm logging all of that sensory information into my brain. So when I do this next pull, I can do it to make this a more even piece and really utilize all the clay that I have. Down at the base, applying a little bit more pressure. Slowly come up off the base. Don't come up too rapidly. Don't corkscrew it. Now here's where I want to be really gentle because it was a little thin. I'm just gliding over that area. in finishing off this pull. Okay, so I feel like it's a fairly even thickness throughout. I am okay with the size of it. I might want it to be a little bit larger. I'm going to change the shape a little bit. I feel like in this bottom area, it's almost a little too concave. It has sort of this hourglass shape to it that I'm not personally fond of. I want instead it to be more volumetric and be more convex down there. So on this next pull, I'm going to use more pressure with my inside hand, and I'm going to flex and push that wall out, and know that I'm accomplishing that with this pad part of my fingertips with my inside left hand. Again, starting at the base, and right here, I'm pushing outward with my inside hand. Now I'm meeting that pressure with my sponge so I don't get too out of control. My hands are still pressing against each other, but especially down in the bottom there, I was using comparatively more pressure with my left hand than my right hand. I'm going to make this piece a little bit wider still. This is my second shaping pull. Use a little bit more pressure with my left hand. So first you want to get all the clay up in the air, and then you want to do any shaping. Sometimes I like a wide open cup. I really like to be able to see what's inside the cup. I like a big cup so it can hold a lot of stuff, and also realize your pieces are going to shrink 10%. So whatever size you want your pots to be, you need to make them noticeably larger than that so that they'll shrink down to your ideal size. I'm going to smooth out the shape with my rubber rib. I'm holding it on the side, just applying a slight curve to the edge of the rib with my right hand. I'm slightly curving this and holding it on the side and pressing the clay wall into it with my left hand. Leaving a really smooth surface, it erases all the throwing rings and it scrapes off all the slip and slop clay from the surface. So using it can make your pots stronger. It can make them less prone to collapse during the throwing process. Now I'm going to go back over it with my fingers and put some kind of softness into it, give a sense of maybe a throwing mark in the surface of the clay to help communicate what it's like to actually make this piece, to give the end user something to engage with when they pick up the piece. I'm going to come over it, kind of using the side of my index finger here, and press into it in just kind of a loose, almost like a lazy manner coming up. Something to give a little bit more action, a little bit more reaction with the surface and the glaze perhaps as the glaze melts over that mark in the clay. Make sure with cups that the rim is nicely finished. This can be the most important part of the cup. You're literally asking someone to take that top edge of clay and put it inside their mouth. A cup can have a very intimate relationship with the end user. You probably feel very intimately connected to some of the cups that you use every day in your house already. So this rim might seem fine, but from my perspective, I can see kind of a sharp edge right on the very top. And I know that there's a level of extra smoothness I can apply to it. You could just press down with wet fingertips and let it glide through. You want to figure out how you're going to hold your fingertips so that you can support it, perhaps right underneath where you apply some pressure. What I like to do to finish my rims is use a little piece of plastic from one of those cheap grocery store plastic bags. And I like to take this and use it like a polishing tool, holding it in between my fingers. I'm gonna gently press down at the rim and cup it around that edge. And then I'm gonna apply a slight amount of pressure down on the rim, very gently, cupping the plastic around, from the inside to the outside. So I smooth and polish that rim all the way around. It might help you to take this off more cleanly if you clean your hands first. Sometimes it's nice to just sponge clean your hands and dry them off and clean your bat surface too. It can help make this removal process easier. Before I cut it, I just want to look at my base. It can also help if this is clean down here. I'm digging my fingernail in and just making a clean square base on the outside. You could remove a little bit of clay right now with the tip of your wood tool if you want to. Hopefully you've done everything you can to pull that extra clay up in the air. It's nice to scrape a little bit back right now. It'll make taking it off easier, and it'll make trimming it once it's firmed up a lot easier. So to take it off, I'm going to get a bunch of water on one side of the bat. That's probably half a cup of water, and I'm going to cut that under with my wire tool. And I usually have to do this twice until I can feel it move on the bat. Once you feel it slippery and sliding around down there, then you should be able to slide it off of the edge onto your waiting hand to move it onto my wood board. Then I'm going to sponge the excess water off so that I have a dry surface. But this little pancake of clay that's left from removing the previous piece, I'm going to leave that in place, and that's going to really help my next ball of clay stick on there. You might think about what you want to drink from your cups. I think a cup that you would drink orange juice from might necessarily be a different shape than one that you would drink hot chocolate from. You might make cups for a special occasion beverage. You might make cups to specifically serve lemonade in, or some other type of beverage where you would need something taller. Maybe iced tea cup would need to be larger so you could fit a lot of ice cubes in it. You might design a set of cups that you could use in your car. Maybe they have to have a special shape or size base to them to fit in a cup holder on a certain chair that you have. All of these things can help you make decisions about the particular shape of cup that you want. If you want a cup that's going to keep something warmer longer, you might want it to have a more enclosed mouth at the top. If you're making cups for someone else, you might think about the shape and size of their hands. What we're really going to be looking at when we look at your cups is the inside floor. So as I'm spreading it open here, I'm trying to move my thumb across the floor completely level with the wheel head. And I'm going to open it up. When I get to that spot with my thumb on the inside down in there, I'm going to pause and hold. Let the wheel go around 10 or 20 or 30 times and just hold there to ensure that the floor meets the wall at a level 90-degree angle on the inside corner. You need to spread open that floor flat and wide. There's always going to be some little bumps and ridges down in there. So now when I hold the sponge down in there to compress, I'm going to take care of those bumps and ridges. You want to get to a point with your straight-walled cylinders where they can be almost automatic, where you've developed kind of a memory within the muscles of your hands that you can do the same shape over and over again without having to stop and think about it so much. Because from this shape, which I call the mother shape, so many other things are possible. But you want to pull all the clay up in the air to the right thickness that you want in a straight-walled cylinder first. I'm going to show a technique called collaring. Collaring is when you use pressure on the outside only, and I'm going to squeeze it in gently and make it more narrow. This is a technique that you would use to make like a narrow neck for a vase or a bottle. I'm going to do some collaring in the middle section of this cup though. Start slightly beneath where you want it to come in, and as you come up, apply some pressure, squeezing the cylinder in, collaring it more narrow, and then gently release as you exit. So when you're collaring, you want to do it just a little bit at a time, and how much pressure you can apply each time really depends on how thin and how soft the clay wall is. As I'm doing it, I notice I'm starting to kind of tweak out some other areas of the cup. Down here underneath, it's becoming uneven, and I notice a little unevenness at the top also. I'm going to hold steady on the bottom. And by holding steady, I'm going to try and take the wobble that was in there and even it out. I'm going to have this pull or this evening stroke come all the way up the side. Since I know I want it to come in more here, I'm going to apply more pressure with my outside hand pressing in and tapering off the top. As you kind of choke or bunch the clay inward, it can come upward in an uneven manner, and just this slight amount of irregularity up here is due to the collaring I did underneath it. So before I'm done with this cup, I'm going to trim the rim level. You certainly want to have it level at the top so that when you go to trim it and you flip it upside down, a level rim will mean that the floor is level for trimming, which is really important. I'm going to hold the pen tool firmly in my right hand with the handle of it coming down the palm of my right hand and my right index finger at about the midpoint of the pin. I'm going to hold it on the outside of the cup at the 3 o'clock position. Before I start to touch the pot though, my left hand is going to go inside the mouth of the piece so that when I do embed the pin tip through, it's going to hit on my left finger pad, which is on the inside of the rim. And my left thumb is bridging over the rim and helping to hold my right hand steady. So this is the starting position for cutting the rim with your pen tool. Make sure that you're able to hold steady before you touch it with the pin. As soon as you touch it, you're going to start to cut it. And if you're wavering at all, you're going to cut it more unlevel instead of more level. So brace your arms. Make sure you're steady before you start to touch it. You want to go down about a ½ inch and slowly start to put that pin tip through. First, I just try and draw a circle and make sure I'm holding still. Then I slowly go through, and I'm going to wait till I feel it all the way around on my inside finger, and then you can flick it off of the rim. Once you cut it with the pen tool like that, it's going to leave a really sharp square edge, which is not the kind of rim that I want my cup to have. So after you cut it with the pen tool, you probably need to take some extra steps to smooth this and round it. I'm just holding wet fingertips on there to round off what was a really square, sharp cut rim before. By making it concave here, I don't have to have my handle stick out as far in order to get more fingers in there. It's going to give my fingers a little bit more room to fit inside because there's like an indentation in the side wall of the cup in that area. I also like to think about the overall proportions of the cup. That is, size relationships just in this small object right now can have a big impact on how the design of the piece affects us. So I usually look at the diameter of the base, the diameter of the mouth, the overall height, and any other kind of distinguishing inward or outward swellings or angles or shapes that exist within this piece. Sometimes I like to think about the piece being encased by a rectangle that gives it about 3 inches of space all the way around. And I try and think about not the shape of the cup so much, but the shape of the space that encircles the cup. So I'm looking at this curve and how it pushes out space around it. I'm looking not just at the diameter of the mouth, but the particular way that it flares out. And I'm trying to see this whole contour profile of the piece as one kind of orchestrated line through space, that it has a dynamic quality to it that we're going to interact with in dimensional space. It's not just a cut out piece of paper, but it's fully dimensional. And of course the handle is going to interact with all of that also. I'm just saying, look at your cups now as more completed objects when you're doing the last few pulls and shaping moves, because it can really help them to have a more finished look at the end. There's all kinds of fun different shapes you can make with your ribs, or pressing tools or other shaped wood sticks up against the clay. You might go through the junk drawer in your kitchen or in your utensil holder and see what other kind of tools you have at hand that you could press into the clay to make different shapes. With this cylinder, I've left it a little thicker and the clay is a little firmer, and I'm going to come and press in a series of zigzags or step marks into the side of it with this corner part of my rib. I'm going to start at the base and dig in underneath a little bit. That will help me a lot with trimming later. And then I'm going to come above that and just press in with the corner and do a series of inward and outward touches. I think this will be a really fun surface for the glazes to melt over. I want to make pots that people want to hold on to longer, and they want to use, and they want to have a memorable experience when they do. So although I don't want this to be uncomfortable, I'm not going to leave it too sharp. I want it to be interactive. So even though I have kind of a sharp surface on the outside, I am still going to leave a smooth, finished rim. Another nice way you can easily change the shape of a cylinder is to move it from being a circle into being a square. With this one, I'm going to come on the inside now and start to push it out on one side, and then I'm going to go and do it on the opposite side, and now I'm going to come and do it on the other two corners of the square. This is a nice option for a cup also because it gives you walls and angles to play with when you're attaching a handle, and it also kind of makes it slightly more interactive when the end user drinks from it, and do they put their mouth on a corner or on a side wall. It's a fun, simple thing you can do to quickly make a dynamic new shape. And I'll still be able to trim it fine even though the mouth is square, because the base is still a perfectly centered circle. I think having a straight-walled cylinder of clay on the wheel is kind of like having a blank page for a writer or blank canvas for a painter. You can do anything with it. You can imprint anything onto it. You can do things with the surface, and you can also do things with the form. With this cup, I'm going to put a kind of a subtle S shape into it, a back and forth curve onto the side wall. Starting at the base, I'm going to use slightly more pressure with my inside hand, and now I'm going to use more pressure with my outside hand, and now I'm going to press outward again with my inside hand and inward again with my outside hand to make this kind of back and forth curving wall. Lots of times when I want to create a special shape like this, I'll go across the form first once with my hands, and then I'll go back over that using a rib to further define the shape and clean it up a little bit. If I hold the rib in the right way, I can do one continuous motion of outward and inward, back and forth, alternating dominant pressure between my left hand and my right hand as I come up the wall. The cups in your series do not need to be identical. I'm not going to measure your work with a pair of calipers and see how far off each one is from the others, but they should be going towards a common shape. They should be related to each other. I want to see evidence of practice of the same shape again and again. And again, the goal with all of this is just to have you develop your own personal style, to think about what you want to have in a vessel form. It does not take much variation from the perfectly straight-walled cylinder to make something really unique to you. I hope that you can start with lots of experimentation and playing around and gradually come to a shape that feels most appropriate for you, and pay attention to the marks that you're making on the surface of the clay, whether they're very intentional or if they start unintentional. They can communicate a lot about your particular touch and have a big impact on the end user too.